Background music, deep orchestral hum, tension building. Narrator, calm yet powerful. In the brutal war that raged across Europe, there were weapons so terrifying, so mysterious, that soldiers swore they were forged by sorcery. German tank crews, proud of their indestructible machines, the Tiger, the Panther, the Panzer, that suddenly found themselves helpless against a single shot that could melt through inches of armor like butter. They called it witchcraft. Sound effect, explosion, tank alarm, soldiers shouting in German. It was 1943. The German war machine ruled Europe with steel and fire. Their tanks, once symbols of unstoppable power, crushed everything in their path. The Allies had courage, they had numbers. But what they didn't have was penetration, literally. No ordinary shell could pierce a German Tiger's front armor. Allied anti-tank guns fired, sparked, and bounced off. The tanks rolled forward, slowly, confidently, like iron monsters immune to pain. British, American, and Soviet commanders all faced the same nightmare question. How do you kill a beast made of steel? The problem: German armor dominance. By 1942-43, the Germans had developed tank armor that could shrug off most conventional shells. Tiger I, 100mm frontal armor. Panther, sloped armor equivalent to 120. Panzer IV, late model, up-armored to resist even 6-pounder guns. To the Allies, this was devastating. Soldiers described battles where entire platoons fired until their gun barrels glowed red. And still the Tiger rolled on. A British tanker once wrote in his diary, "We could hit a Tiger 20 times, and it would still turn its turret toward us like a lion annoyed by flies." Something had to change. And then it did. And the breakthrough, a new kind of explosion. In secret laboratories across Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union, scientists began working on a revolutionary idea, a shaped charge. Instead of relying on brute force or speed, this weapon used science, specifically the physics of focused explosions. A shaped charge could channel the explosive energy into a narrow jet of molten metal, so hot and so fast that it could burn through thick steel armor in milliseconds. It didn't just punch a hole, it melted it. When the first German tank was hit by one of these strange new shells, the effect was horrifying. The steel armor didn't crack, it glowed. The jet pierced straight through, spraying molten fragments inside the tank like a firestorm. Crews died instantly, their machines turning into fiery tombs. Word spread among German troops. Der Teufel schießt neue Kugeln. The devil is firing new bullets. The birth of the heat shell. The weapon behind this horror was called heat, high explosive anti-tank. It wasn't about velocity anymore. Even a small, slow shell could destroy a heavy tank if it carried a shaped charge. The British used it in weapons like the PIAT projector, infantry, anti-tank. The Americans developed it for their bazooka, and the Germans themselves, ironically, used the same principle in their Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck. But to the men who first saw it in action, it looked like something out of hell. A silent shell that could melt armor like candle wax. No ricochet, no deflection. Just instant death, the battlefield impact. The first field reports stunned military command. At the Battle of Normandy, British infantry used the PIAT to knock out tanks that once took artillery to stop. In Italy, American troops used bazookas to punch holes through Panther turrets. Even Soviet soldiers, armed with their crude but deadly RPG-43 grenades, could destroy panzers at close range. The balance of power had shifted. For the first time, a foot soldier, a single man with one shell, could destroy the mightiest weapon in the Nazi arsenal, and that changed everything. Narrator, dramatic close. It was not magic. It was physics. But for those who faced it, it might as well have been witchcraft. This is the story of the shell that melted German tanks like butter. The science behind the witchcraft. Background, subtle laboratory hum, chalk scribbles, metallic clinks. Before it became a weapon of fear, it was a simple question of geometry, physics, and a strange trick of chemistry. In 1888, a Swiss engineer named Charles Monroe noticed something unusual when he carved letters into an explosive block and detonated it against a metal plate. The letters were imprinted into the steel in perfect reverse. That strange imprint meant one thing: the explosive energy could be focused. Decades later, German scientists rediscovered this Monroe effect. If a cone-shaped cavity was carved into a high explosive and lined with metal, copper, aluminum, or even steel, the blast didn't expand outward. It folded inward into a jet of molten metal traveling faster than 8,000 meters per second. The jet wasn't a bullet. It was a plasma lance, a stream of metal hotter than lava, slicing through armor with surgical precision. That discovery would rewrite warfare. How heat works. When the heat shell detonates, 1. The explosive collapses the conical metal liner. 2. The liner forms a hypervelocity jet. 3. That jet burns through armor, creating a narrow hole. 4. Inside the tank, the molten fragments ricochet, killing crew and setting off ammunition. Unlike other rounds, it didn't depend on speed. Even a slow shell could kill a heavy tank, as long as the shape and distance were right. The magic number, the standoff distance. Engineers found that if the explosion happened too close, the jet dispersed. Too far, and it lost focus. The perfect distance was roughly the same as the shell's diameter, a few inches. So the designers added a nose probe, giving the shell time to form its deadly jet midair. That's why soldiers thought the weapon hung in the air for a split second before melting the tank. The standoff created the illusion of witchcraft. Sound FX, sizzling metal, muffled explosion, tank crew shouting. To the men on the battlefield, it looked impossible. A small, silent warhead that could do what even artillery couldn't. Science had created sorcery, from blueprint to battlefield. Transition, radio chatter, the roar of engines. In 1942, the British unveiled the PIAT, projector, infantry anti-tank. It looked awkward, a heavy spring, a spigot, and a large bomb-like round. But it fired a shaped-charge warhead, one that could penetrate 100 millimeters of armor. During the Sicily campaign, British troops tested it in combat. They were terrified, not of the enemy, but of the PIAT itself. Its recoil was brutal. Its spring had to be cocked manually. Yet when the first shell hit a German tank, it blew a hole straight through. The crew never had a chance. The Germans fight back. Sound, tank treads, distant thunder, commands in German. Germany didn't take long to realize what had happened. Their scientists studied captured heat shells and were stunned. Even Hitler reportedly remarked that the enemy uses a weapon that defies reason. To counter it, they developed Schürzen, thin side skirts of metal hanging from tank hulls. These skirts triggered the heat jet before it reached the main armor, dispersing the molten stream. Later they added mesh screens and spaced armor, concepts still used today. But adaptation came too late. At Normandy, hundreds of German tanks fell to Allied infantry weapons. Each destroyed vehicle was proof that the invincible Wehrmacht had met its match. Psychological warfare. Reports described German crews terrified of advancing infantry, a reversal of earlier years. One panzer commander wrote, "Every bush hides a PIAT, every corner a bazooka. You feel hunted, not as hunter but prey." Fear spread faster than the shells themselves. For the first time, tank armor no longer guaranteed survival. A legacy of the shaped charge. Music, calm strings, post-war tone. When the war ended in 1945, the shaped charge principle didn't fade. It evolved. The post-war world built its next generation of anti-tank weapons. On this same foundation, the RPG-7, the Law, the Tau missile, and even modern jet warhead missiles like Javelin and NLAW all descend from that same witchcraft. Today, the heat principle is used in tank shells, helicopter missiles, anti-bunker weapons, even space engineering experiments. A 19th century scientific curiosity had reshaped the 20th century. In the end, it wasn't black magic that melted tanks. It was the power of human curiosity, and the truth that even the mightiest armor can be undone by a spark of imagination. From the ashes of war. Background, soft wind over ruined cities, echo of boots on rub. When the guns fell silent in 1945, the world began to count the cost of destruction and the lessons learned. From the devastation of Berlin to the ruins of Warsaw, engineers collected fragments of destroyed tanks, melted armor, warped steel, and traces of the mysterious shaped charge jet. They realized something chilling. The heat effect was so efficient that it required no massive cannons, no tanks, only knowledge, and knowledge could not be disarmed. Captured secrets. In both East and West, the scientists who had mastered the shaped charge became valuable prizes. The Americans brought many under Operation Paperclip, while the Soviets took others to Moscow research institutes. Out of this quiet scientific race emerged new generations of anti-tank weapons. The M72 Law, light anti-tank weapon in the U.S., the RPG-2, and later the RPG-7 in the Soviet Union, and experimental wire-guided missiles in France and Britain. What began as a desperate wartime invention was now an industry, a new science of destruction. Narrator, somber. It was no longer about tanks or infantry. It was about the physics of survival. The Cold War, fire and fear. Background, tense, ticking sounds. Jet aircraft fly overhead. The Cold War wasn't just nuclear. It was chemical, electronic, and mechanical. And the shaped charge became one of its quiet heroes. In the 1960s and 70s, every major army developed heat-based missiles. The American Tau missile, the British Swingfire, the Soviet Sagar AT-3, the French Hot missile. These could pierce up to 800 millimeters of armor, enough to destroy any tank in existence. Vietnam, the jungle proves the concept. In Vietnam, U.S. forces used the M72 law to destroy enemy bunkers and light vehicles. A descendant of the same shaped charge that once terrified Nazi tank crews. Meanwhile, captured weapons like the RPG-7 became symbols of guerrilla warfare worldwide. From Afghanistan's mountains to Africa's deserts, a single fighter could carry a weapon capable of defeating millions of dollars worth of armor. A weapon born from World War II witchcraft, one soldier said, became the slingshot of modern war. Modern evolution, smart warheads. Background, digital radar pings, missile launch sound. The 21st century brought computers, drones, and precision. But the heart of the anti-tank weapon still beats, with the same principle first seen in WWII. Modern systems like Javelin, USA, NLAW, UK, Sweden, Spike, Israel, use tandem heat warheads, 2 charges, one to blow away armor protection, the second to pierce deep inside. Even modern tanks with reactive armor or composite plating remain vulnerable. The shaped charge has evolved, but it has never been defeated. The physics that refused to die. The science of the shaped charge remains one of the most elegant and terrifying in all of engineering. It doesn't rely on magic, momentum, or massive shells, just the perfect focus of energy. It's the purest expression of applied physics in war. It's the same principle that once melted tigers in Europe, now guiding smart missiles over deserts. 70 years later, the witchcraft still burns, the legacy of fire and fear. Music softens. Montage of black and white soldiers fading into modern troops. Today, the descendants of those WWII soldiers carry sleek launchers instead of heavy spigots. But the philosophy is unchanged. The heat shell symbolizes something greater than a weapon. It's a reminder of how knowledge, when harnessed by desperation, becomes unstoppable. From myth to science. In 1943, terrified tank crews whispered of sorcery. By 1945, scientists wrote equations explaining the plasma jet. By 2025, engineers simulated in computers with mathematical precision. What once seemed supernatural is now studied in classrooms. But the fear it inspired and the awe remains timeless. Narrator, soft, reflective. The true witchcraft wasn't the shell. It was the human mind that created it. The same spark that can build can also burn. The flame that never died. Music, slow orchestral rise, emotional cinematic tone. From the mud of Normandy to the deserts of modern warfare. One idea, the shaped charge, has endured. It humbled empires, leveled the battlefield, and changed how mankind fights its wars. They called it witchcraft, but it was simply the brilliance of science. And as long as armor exists, this ancient spell, forged from fire and fear, will never fade. Fade to black with slow echoing explosion sound. Text on screen. The shell that melted German tanks like butter. They called it witchcraft. A story of science, courage, and the fire that changed war forever.